Okay, guys, it's time for chapter 9 of Leprechaun in Late Winter. Skunks or Weasels? Augusta, whispered Jack. She's tiny. They must have shrunk her, whispered Annie. Hide, whispered Jack. He crawled away from the door, and Annie crawled after him. They pressed their backs against the grassy mound. Why are we hiding? Asked Annie. We can't let them see us, said Jack. They might shrink us, too. But how are we going to save Augusta? Asked Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Hey, I just remembered something, said Annie. Didn't Mary say that the girl in her story would become small if she'd gone inside the hollow hill? Yeah, she did, said Jack. So maybe that means you can only get shrunk if you go inside. Right, said Annie. So let's go back to the doorway and call from outside. We'll be simple, direct, honest, and very polite, just like Willie said. We'll tell the king and queen we've come to take our friend back to her family. But wait a minute, said Jack. How can she go back to normal life with her family if she's only 8 inches tall? Good point, said Annie. This is so weird, said Jack. Let's worry about her size later, said Annie. For now, we just have to help her escape. Right, said Jack. Let's try it. Jack and Annie crawled back to the entrance of the hollow hill and peeked inside. In the pale green light, a very small Augusta stood watching the dancers. Excuse us, please, Annie called. The drumming stopped, the dancers froze, all eyes turned to Jack and Annie. The High King and High Queen looked startled. Who are you? The king called. How did you find us? That's not important, said Annie. We are very sorry to bother you, but we've come to get our very dear friend Augusta. We have to take her home to her very loving family. Please, thank you, added Jack, trying to sound polite. Before the king or queen could speak, Augusta rushed forward. No, I don't want to go home, she screamed in a high little voice. I don't want to leave the she. Whoa, said Jack. That was a surprise. Maybe Augusta was under a spell. Leave here at once, the High King commanded Jack and Annie. You are not invited. You have no business here. Yes, we are leaving right away. But Augusta has to come with us, Annie called. Thank you. She's right, said Jack. Augusta has to come with us, please. Thank you. No, I want to stay here, said Augusta. I'm not good for anything at home. Mary was right. I'm not happy there. Jack was amazed. Augusta wasn't under a spell. She really wanted to stay with the she. The girl will stay with us, said the High King. Now go. Now. No way, Jack blurted out. We won't leave without Augusta. The crowd gasped. What? Roared the High King. Sorry, said Jack. I meant you will pay for this rudeness, the king yelled. Before Jack and Annie could get away, the king thrust out his arm and sparks flew from the tips of his tiny fingers. Suddenly, Jack and Annie couldn't move their arms or legs. The king kept pointing at them. Skunks? He shouted at the crowd. Or weasels? They can't move. Neither, please. Thank you, shouted Jack. He was glad he could still talk. But the crowd began chanting in a strange high voice, Skunks, skunks, skunks. The king nodded and raised both arms into the air. Jack was desperate. He didn't want to live in the rest of his life as a skunk. Wait, please, Jack shouted. I'm sorry I was rude. Before you change us, I really, really need to tell Augusta something. Thank you. The king looked at Jack for a long moment. Then he lowered his arms and the crowd grew silent. Thank you, said Jack. Augusta, listen to me. You should go back home. You're good for lots of things there. You're very kind. And Mary said you have a brave heart and a fine mind. Those are really good things to have. Tears rolled down Augusta's cheek and she shook her head. Listen to me, please, Jack went on. Mary says you're not happy, but some things do make you happy, Augusta. You said you feel close to nature. You said you love simple folk like Mary. And I know you love stories, too. Mary said you remembered every story she told you. You used to tell them yourself, word for word. You have a great memory. He's right, Augusta, yelled Annie. Those are your gifts. You need to give your gifts to the world. Augusta was still for a moment. Then she shook her head. I want to stay, she said. You have had your say, the High King shouted at Jack and Annie. Now prepare to become skunks. He raised his arms again. Oh no, thought Jack. Wait, Finvera, said the High Queen. The High Queen stepped closer to Augusta. The Queen wore a silver cloak that glittered with diamonds. She had jewels in her long red hair that shone like stars. Her high, clear voice rang like a bell. I am Queen Annie of the Sidhe, she said. The boy said that you love stories and that you remember every story you hear. Is this true? Augusta nodded. Now, then listen to our story, said Queen Annie. All of the Sidhe were very still, watching Augusta and the Queen. In the morning of time, out of a rosy sky and a windy light, we came, said the Queen. We were tribes of a supernatural people called the Tuatha De Danann. Strong, fearless, and noble we were. 5 roads carried our armies through the wild, wooded lands of Ireland, and for eons we ruled the Irish world. But when the humans came, the wild woods gave way to villages and pastures. Our tribes hid in the hollow hills, in ruined forts, and under the sea. Over time, we made ourselves smaller and smaller so we could easily hide from humans. Eventually, we became known as the Sidhe, and we were mocked as the wee folk of fairy. But in truth, we are a tribe of the great Tuatha De Danann, and we live in enchanted places like this one, protected by what is left of our magic. Do you understand? I do. Yes, said Augusta. Our stories were passed down for centuries in the old language of Ireland. But as the old language was replaced with English, the stories began to fade away, Queen Annie said. Go home now with your friends, human child. Go back for our sake. Seek out the old storytellers and tell them to tell you the tales of my people. Learn the old language, read the old manuscripts, write our stories down and share them before they are completely lost. Share them with all the people of Ireland and the world. Will you do that for us? Will you use your gifts to tell our stories and restore our dignity? Augusta's eyes shone. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Yes. Good. Then I will send you all swiftly home, said the Queen. She beckoned to a small dancer who stepped forward with a tiny silver chalice. Sip the honey nectar of the Sidhe, said the High Queen. She took the chalice and held it out to Augusta, and Augusta took a sip. A second later, Jack felt cold wind and rain, and he and Annie were standing on the bank of the river. Augusta was standing beside them, and she was her normal size again.